as witches, we talk a lot about the elements. Many of us call the quarters, we work with the elemental energies, air, fire, water, and earth. But what about the fifth element, spirit? It can be difficult to understand how to work with it, how to incorporate it into your practice. And so today in our episode, we'll be talking all about the spirit element and different ways that you can work with it, ways you can bring it into your life in both mundane and magical ways. So, merry meet. I'm Aislinn. This is Ask Aislinn. And like I said, I'm here today talking all about the spirit element. So, just saying hi to those who are joining us. Welcome. And if you are with us live, I see Kurt and Debbie are in the chat. If you're here with us live, you can leave questions and comments in the chat. We'll have a Q&A at the end. I'll also be watching the comments as we go. And leave a heart or a thumbs up anywhere in the episode. That helps us get this out to more people. And also, if you are watching back later on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Body Mind Witchcraft, and you won't miss any future episodes. So I am going to dive right in, and I see Amy's also here. Hi, everybody. So I'm going to start by talking about the spirit element, and then I'm going to give you some suggestions on how to work with it. Hi, Rebecca. Hi, everybody. So nice to see you guys. So the fifth element of spirit can be a bit elusive. It can be a bit confusing, like I said in the introduction. Mostly it has to do with the fact it doesn't have a physical, like a physical manifestation here in our plane. So it's rather easy to take a bowl of salt, right, and work with the earth element, or have a candle so we can work with the fire element, or we can blow on our hand, for example, right, or stand in the wind and we can feel the air element, or we can wash ourselves, let the water kind of run over us in the shower and we can feel the water element. But it can be harder to understand where the spirit element is in the physical plane. Now, the fifth element is called Akasha in Sanskrit. This translates to ether. I'll be talking a bit more about that later as we talk about the etheric plane. It is really the animating force of everything. And so, in a lot of ways, it transcends the other elements. And so, some might even say that the spirit element helps create the other elements. And in fact, in our own quarter calls for our tradition, we actually refer to Akasha or spirit as the source of all the other elements. And just saying hi to Carla, and just Dora is here. Hi, everybody. So good to see you guys. Spirit helps us manifest things. It helps us create things. It has a very creative energy to it. And it can be said that it manifests the other four elements. So in a lot of ways, what's kind of interesting is if you think about the elements, and I don't like to think of them as having a hierarchy, though some people might say there's kind of a hierarchical way that the elements stack on top of each other. So for example, earth is the most dense of all the elements. We might say it's lower below the others. But I don't really think about that as being earth being lesser than. It just simply means it's closer to the earthly plane, right? And then as we get higher up and we get into air, for example, air is more ethereal, it gets closer to that etheric plane. But there is something to be said about spirit being kind of in a different league of its own. And I think that is another reason that it is confusing for people how to work with it. So when we work with the element of spirit, we are able to draw things out of the etheric plane. That we'll spend some time talking about that at the end. But what's also kind of interesting is if you try to Google this, and I did this right before this episode, ways to work with the spirit element, and you will be sorely disappointed in what you find. There isn't a lot out there in just a quick Google search, as opposed to if you said ways to work with the fire element, immediately you're going to find all these different ways. And in fact, when I was asking ways to work with the spirit element, a lot of things that were coming up in the algorithm were how to connect to like spirits, right? So like as though I wanted to speak with those who crossed over, or maybe I wanted to speak with nature spirits or something like that. So there just isn't as much information about this. And I think, again, that leads to this confusion. Now, our powers of manifestation depend very heavily on spirit. So it is worth anybody who wants to do manifestation in their practice, is interested in drawing things in. It is worth really considering how we work with spirit in our daily practice, how we can incorporate it into kind of an overall practice, right? But we rarely spend much time thinking about spirit, even though it plays such an important role. And it gets forgotten, right, when we're calling all the other quarters. And even in our own tradition, most of the time we call the spirit element. There are some rituals, like the dark moon rituals, where I usually don't. But I am aware that spirit exists, and we do it in our full moon rituals, we do it in our Sabbats as well. Now, there are some traditions who only recognize four elements, and I would have to say that our first tradition that we were in before we broke away and created our own tradition only really called the four elements, and then we added in a fifth when we broke away and created our own tradition. But if you look at other cultures who practice magic or who practice a more spiritual path, we do see this five elements pattern kind of repeating. So, for example, in Chinese medicine, we see wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. And there we have five elements, and they may be calling them different things, and they don't really match up super well with, like, for example, the five elements in our Ayurveda, but still there are five elements. So there's this recognition that there are five building blocks of etheric matter. Now, in Ayurveda, which is where the chakra system comes from, we have five elements. We have earth, fire, water, air, and then akasha, which translates to ether. We'll talk more about that later. Translates to ether in English, and then we would call it spirit in more of the witchcraft traditions. Some witches also will adopt that fifth element, spirit. So it's not really a new concept, but then in some ways it is. So I think that again leads to all the confusion that people have around it. But what's kind of interesting when I say it's not really a new concept. So, and this is something interesting too, is that I was following a witchcraft group, and people were having this conversation about how spirit is this new addition. And they were actually saying that Wiccans had placed on the magical circle, that there was never this spirit element before Wiccans came along and did this. I have to disagree with that because, again, looking back at the different magical traditions, the different spiritual traditions, we typically see five elements. And in fact, the Greeks, too, though they didn't label it spirit per se, they recognized that there was something else besides the four elements. They felt that there would be something that was missing from kind of that classical set. They knew that the universe was physical, but they knew that there was something beyond that as well. And so they were the first ones who termed that ether. And so that's where that translation of akasha becoming ether comes from. Now, the Greeks believed that ether was upper air. So it had like a connection to air, which we also see in the Ayurvedic tradition. Air and ether are very, very connected to each other, air being the most etheric of the physical elements. The Greeks said that ether was the air of the gods, in fact. So it would be like the air, the breath that the gods would breathe. And they breathed that out into the celestial sphere, which allowed things to happen, things to manifest out here. Now, besides its role in manifestation, spirit as the fifth element really helps to keep the other elements in balance. And I think that's an important thing to think about, because if all we're doing is working with the four elements, they have this tendency to get out of balance on their own. So, for example, earth can very quickly become rigid, right? So we need earth to ground, but if you get too grounded and you can't get up and move, it becomes way too rigid. It's not flexible, right? Water can become too stagnant, right? If it's not moving. Fire can become destructive. Air can become really flighty. And so what spirit does is it comes in and it helps to balance all of those other elements. It actually gives us the means of finding that balance in our own lives, right? And see, like I see here, Silver Siren had said, Eva, the pentacle has all five on it, right? And we're going to talk about that in a moment too. Yes, exactly. There's five points on the pentacle, and one of them is for spirit. And just saying hi to a few others joining us. I see Colleen and Cindy are here too. Hi, everybody. So good to see you tonight. So we can draw on the element of spirit when we're feeling unbalanced. So, for example, if you feel like your fire is out of balance, let's say you feel like you have too much or too little of it, or there's something just out of whack in your life, you can work with spirit, and just that natural working of spirit will help you bring balance in. Now, another thing that's kind of interesting is that when you put the four elements in balance, you naturally bring the element of spirit in as well. And I think that's why some people don't talk about spirit, is because, again, like I said, it's kind of elusive, it's kind of hard to understand how to work with it, but it also is something that just kind of comes along for the ride. So it's sort of like in the chakra system, we don't talk a ton about the crown chakra. Everyone wants to balance the root, and they want to balance the sacral chakra and the throat, right? Everybody's got heart chakra problems. But we rarely talk about the crown. And part of that has to do with the fact that we're in spiritual circles where most of us are working on like an upward ascension pathway anyway. So we're kind of tapping into that. But at the same time, we expect that the crown chakra will kind of balance itself when everything below it balances too, right? So we bring all that, all the other six chakras into balance, and all of a sudden the crown is balanced. Same idea with the elements. Bring the four elements, the earthly elements, into balance in your life, and you'll find that spirit just naturally appears. And so there's a question somebody asked later that we're going to have in the Q&A about how to basically kind of surrender to the divine, which in some ways I could say surrender to spirit as well. And a lot of it has to do with balance and kind of the work we do to get there. But we'll learn more about that in a bit. So something else that is kind of interesting to think about, because spirit is the primary force of creation in the universe, it doesn't have the polarity of those other elements either. So like we talked about with fire, right? Fire is so creative. We need it. We need that fire to burn, right? So we have creativity. We need metabolism. So we have energy, right? All of that. But it can become destructive. It can become angry, right? There's always this negative side to every element. Spirit doesn't really have a polarity. It just exists. And so that's another kind of interesting thing to think about with spirit. So as people were saying in the chat, the placement of the spirit element in the pentacle is at the top of the pentacle. So I drew this last time. I did an episode on the spirit element like over a year ago. Drew this on a small note card. So I'm going to put it up on a bigger piece of paper so we could see here. So we have spirit at the very top of all of this. And again, kind of shows that idea that I don't like to think of it as a governance or something, but again, it's in a league of its own. And so we balance everything below, we work with the four earthly elements, and then immediately that opens up spirit to us. Now, I thought another thing too I wrote across the top here is 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 = 5. And no, this is not 1984. We're trying to brainwash people into thinking that's true. But what that means, 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 = 5, means that spirit is basically the elements are greater than the sum of their parts, right? So we bring the four in, and immediately we get the fifth as well. So just kind of food for thought, something interesting to think about here in the pentacle. So spirit is the essence of all life. It gives life to all things. It breathes life into the universe. It animates the body as well. And it separates the living from the non-living. So when we die, or if you've ever been around someone in the moments of their death and you've seen the body lose its, like the essence of its life, it is spirit that disappears. It is the element of ether that is gone, that leaves the body, that goes off somewhere. Now, some might say that that spirit is the soul. In my experience, I wouldn't equate them as totally synonymous. I think that spirit is pure energy that creates the soul, but it's not the same thing as the individual soul that we're talking about when someone says it's the soul. I usually think of like the individual soul that we all carry that is unique to us. That spirit, though, is what goes into creating that. It is a highly spiritual energy. We can use it, like I said, to direct the other energies of the other elements. And another thing that I think it's also important to note here is that spirit is not the same thing as great spirit. So some people will use the word great spirit to talk about like the we might say the universe. So some people might say the universe. They might say, what are some other words for it? Like great creator, like whatever you call the overall creating force of the universe. So if you are a soft polytheist and you work with a variety of different deities, and even if you're a hard polytheist, you may still believe in this kind of overall energy that is the source of everything. And so that we might call great spirit. But when we're talking about the element of spirit, that's the thing that descends down into this plane and animates everything here. So not quite the same as that great spirit. So let's see, what else can we talk about? So let's talk about what we can do to work with it. So spirit as the underlying pattern behind all things, it's a subtle force that permeates and animates everything. So that means it's all around you at all times. You just have to figure out how to tap into it. Some might call it prana or chi in other traditions. So prana, we might call it that in Ayurveda. I will call it that many times in witchcraft circles. So when I say prana, I'm talking about like that kind of similar kind of energy of spirit. So what would we do to work with it? Some systems have assigned correspondences to it, but like I said in the beginning, if you Google how to work with the spirit element, you're not going to find a lot. And even if you look in some witchcraft books, you will not find the large correspondence tables that you're going to find for the other elements. Now, traditions like the Golden Dawn, and that's one in particular one, so I have an example here. So the Golden Dawn gave it, as far as I know, maybe the first to give it the direction of above, below, and within. So this idea of like when we call the center, which is where we would place the spirit element in a witchcraft circle. So kind of think about where we place all the other elements. We've usually got air in the east, we've got fire in the south, we've got water in the west, we've got earth in the north, and then usually we'll put spirit in the center. And I always say that it's not just that central focal point in the middle of the circle, it actually extends above the circle and it extends below the circle. So if you think of the circle as being like not just a circle in 2D, but think about it as being a sphere in 3D. And then then this starts to make some more sense, right? So it's the center above and below when we call it. And so as far as I know, the Golden Dawn was one of the first who said that it's above and below the circle. They also assigned the colors violet and white to the spirit element, but there's all other people who assign the color orange. I usually think of it as purple, and I think a lot of that has to do with the associations in Ayurveda and Eastern traditions, where it's going to be a dark blue or a dark purple when you get to the ether element. It also is closer to the crown, right, to the those chakras that vibrate at a higher energy. Now, because spirit is transitory, again, it doesn't really have like a manifestation on earth the way that some of the other elements do. So how would we work with it then? If we can't just light a candle like we can with fire, or we can't just bathe ourselves or let water run over us like we can with water, what do we do? So there's not a lot of other practices like with the other elements. The best thing that you can do is to take the time to set up a daily or almost daily practice for yourself. It's hands down one of the best things you can ever do in your craft. That doesn't mean that this has to be big and elaborate. It doesn't have to be a long practice. All you really need is 5 minutes that you devote to your spirituality a day and that you don't compromise it. And so for some people who are very busy and perhaps there are kids and jobs and all kinds of things, and maybe all you have is 5 minutes in the bathroom, you can sit in the bathroom and do some breath work or do a small meditation or light a candle and just, breathe for a bit. And that can be a game changer for people who don't have something like this set up. So I think that, to me, the best way to work with the spirit element is through daily practice. Now, that can be other things too. Like, you could have a ritual. You can make a little small ritual out of it. You can pull cards. I've done an episode in the past about creating a daily practice, so I'll drop a link for that below for anybody who wants to check that out and get some more ideas. But just finding something where you're able to connect to that spirit element, to the spiritual side of you daily, is going to be the biggest way that you'll bring the spirit element into your life, and really make sure that it helps balance the other elements. Now, I mentioned earlier how big of a role spirit plays in manifestation, and it really does. And anybody who isn't working with the spirit element and is struggling with manifestation, this can be a big game changer for you when you start to do what I'm going to suggest if you're not already doing this. Um, so there is a connection between the spirit element and the throat chakra. I haven't talked about that in this episode much yet, but the spirit element, or the ether element, Akasha, is assigned to the throat chakra in the Ayurvedic and Tantric yoga traditions. So, for that reason, voicing your intentions with your physical voice is an important part of manifestation. And if you're not doing that, I recommend trying it. Even if you're a solitary practitioner and it can feel weird sometimes to sit there and maybe it doesn't. Some people don't find it weird to talk like when there's nobody else there, but sometimes it can feel weird. So you got to kind of get over that and not really be afraid of voicing your desires. Voice, sound, speaking, chanting, singing, even whispering. I love manifestation through whispering. I do it all the time. Anytime that we're activating the voice, we are adding that energy to manifestation. And if you think about it, there are a number of creation myths out there where the deity that brings everything into being spoke, right? Spoke creation into being. We are reflections of the divine. That is the greatest secret that some religions don't want us to know. We are the biggest, we are the greatest reflection of the divine, right? So what that means is that we emulate the divine, right? We imitate it. We also have that divinity within us. And if the divine is speaking things into being, why aren't we? The microcosm versus the macrocosm, right? As above, so below. That's where that all comes from. So when we speak our intentions, we activate things on the etheric plane. That's the above, that's the without, that's the things that are outside of us. And those things become manifest in the etheric plane. Now, the more that we speak them, the more we activate them on the etheric plane, the more likely they are to become manifest in the physical plane. So, like I said, the creation myths show us that this is generally how creation takes place. Now, there are true creative energy centers in your body. The first one is the sacral chakra, which is located in your pelvis, a couple inches below the navel. And then the second one is at the throat chakra. Now, the sacral chakra is really more about our physical manifestation. So we're gonna need both of these centers in order to manifest. Really, what happens with the sacral chakra is we become open and receptive to the energy outside of us, the creative energy outside of us, and we channel that and we bring that into our bodies through, or into this plane through the sacral chakra. And then it's really our throat chakra that then gets activated and then manifested here. That is creation on more of the spiritual level. We speak it into being, we create art, we create music, we create ideas, right? But until they're outside of us, they're just inside of us. That's the sacral chakra. It's there. We've created it, right? But when we give birth to it, we give birth through the throat chakra and we speak it into being, or we bring it out into the universe. Now, both of the centers are important and necessary. So to work with the sacral chakra, we want to work with the water element, but to work with the throat chakra, we want to work with the spirit element. So when you want to make something manifest, try voicing it. And there is just a power in our simple intention. So you can just have an intention, you set that, and there's so much power in that. But when you add your voice to it, you add that extra energy to it. So one thing I was going to mention too is that I've been doing a lot of like releasing energy in my body, and I recommend that people, if you feel like you've got like a lot of stuck and stagnant energy in your body, try this. So find the place where you think it is, and for me, it's different places. So like the other night, it was in my foot, and I think part of it had to do with I did like a 12-mile hike, and I hadn't hiked in a couple of months like that long. And so it probably overdid it a little bit, but there was some tension in my foot, and I really got this sense that like there was kind of a buildup of stuck and stagnant energy there, and it didn't need to be there. And so I began massaging this part of my foot, and then I was just kind of like whispering, let go, let go, let go, let go. And I literally 10 minutes later, my foot was totally fine. Like that energy had released and let go. So there is this really, real great power in uttering those words. So try it if you're not somebody who speaks out loud when you're doing your spell works or your practice. Try it, see what happens, see if it changes anything for you. Now I have some other ways I'm going to share, but I'm just going to go to the chat because I've been ignoring it for a second while I was got carried away with what I was talking about. So Debbie asked, would meditation be a way of connecting to spirit? Meditation is a great way to connect to all of the elements, but definitely can be good for connecting to spirit, for sure. Colleen said, are there times in the moon cycle when it's easier to connect to spirit? Good question. So I think that for everybody, the answer to this might be a little bit different. So some people are going to find that they're going to be more receptive to working with the spirit element near the full moon. Other people might find they're a little bit more receptive near the darker moon, dark moon at the end of the cycle. It really has to do with like the veil is thin at the dark moon a little bit. At the new moon, we kind of have at the full moon, we have our intuition heightened. It tends to be a little bit easier to connect to deity and things like that. So one of those 2 points in the lunar cycle could be good for connecting to spirit, but you can connect to spirit at any time. Just like you can connect to any element at any time, you can connect to spirit at any time as well. And then Debbie said, does the spirit element connect to the crown chakra? So the spirit element connects most to the throat chakra, but you probably asked that question before I had said all of that. And then let's see, Cindy said, my God, Carnunos, every night I get to the point of sleep, I see the symbols, and my guide sitting in the corner always makes me feel safe. And she said, spirit is awesome. Yeah, it very much is. Amy said, do you have a meditation for spirit? That's a good question. I do not, but I could make one. And for those who are in the Shadow Seekers membership, for sure, I can put that in the alignment practices. That is a good idea. And hi, Joey's here. He said, sorry I'm late. Good to see you. Good to see you. We got a while to go here. So I'm gonna give you a few more ideas on connecting to spirit, and then we'll go ahead and open it up for the Q&A, okay? But you can keep the questions and comments coming. So besides voicing your desires and your intentions through your manifestation as a way to connect to spirit, here's some other ideas. Add spirit to your ritual. So if you're somebody who calls the quarters during your ritual and you don't call spirit, add spirit. Kind of like I was telling you when we switched, when we left our old tradition and we started our new tradition, we brought the spirit element in. And so this, I'm going to show you. So I use quarter candles. I use these like prayer candles for my quarter candles. And so here it's a purple one that I got for spirit. The purple candles are not as easy to find. If you can find these somewhere, buy a bunch of them because they're hard to find. It's much easier to find the red and green, yellow, and blue for the other elements. A little bit harder to find these ones. So I would recommend bringing that in. And if you want to work just exclusively with the spirit element, then you could just light your purple candle. But if you want to then bring it in as the whole set, then you would get all of your other quarter candles and then bring this one in. And then I would place this on the center of the altar. And again, like I said in the beginning or early in the episode, It's the center above and below is the realm of spirit. Um, Another way to work with the element of spirit is to work with deities in your practice. So I know that a lot of you work with deities, so you're already working with the spirit element when you work with deities. But for those of you who don't work with them, or you're kind of newer to this, or just newer to working with deities, consider bringing in a deity and start to work with them. And that's a whole other episode. And in fact, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but we are going to be doing an episode on deities next week, which will give you some ideas as well. Another thing you can do to work with the spirit element is practice divination. And I think that one of the best ways to work with the spirit element is through divination. Now, over time, you get better and better at tapping into the subconscious, which is really where the messages of divination come from. They don't come from the book that comes from the cards, they come from you and your subconscious and what the symbols mean and what the messages mean to you. So, the and then I should back up too and say that the subconscious is the part of the mind that needs to connect to spirit. And so through divination, because we're strengthening that connection, therefore we would be strengthening our ability to work with the spirit element through divination. And so I think I mentioned this a few episodes ago, is if you're somebody who has never done divination before, I recommend choosing the type that you're most drawn to. For many people, that's tarot or oracle cards, because they seem to be more accessible to people because we resonate with pictures. We can pick up, even if we don't look at the book, which I definitely recommend people trying to not look at the book if they're really working with their intuition or trying to strengthen that. But we connect to the pictures, right? And they elicit feelings and emotions in us. They elicit connections, right? But perhaps it's the scrying mirror that you're more interested in, that you're more drawn to, or the pendulum, or runes, or something. So just go with whatever you're drawn to. And if you're somebody who practices a lot of divination, try a form that you've never tried before, and that can be a really good way to connect to spirit. Another thing you can do is play the synchronicity game. I've mentioned this in multiple episodes because it's so good. I'm going to mention it again. It's just can't get enough of the synchronicity game. So there's a couple of different ways you can play the synchronicity game. It's a game that invites the universe. It invites spirit to come into your life and talk to you. And so one way that you play it is you've got to really set aside a couple of hours of time to really make this work well. And you want to have it be completely unstructured and unscheduled time. So we can't have like appointments and things in the middle of it. It just has to be clear. And I recommend that people do it on foot and go out somewhere where you can walk, but you can also do it in your car. And you set in, and you basically, I would start with a question. So like some kind of a question that you have. And you will, uh, let me see here. I hope that we're still connected, because I just got an error message that said to check my internet connection. I think we're okay. But if somebody in the chat can say that we're still live, just let me know, okay? Um, so you think up a question in the synchronicity game. And then what you're going to do is you're either going to go out on foot or you're going to go out in a car, and you are going to travel until you see or experience the first interesting thing that comes to you. Okay, Joey said all good. Thank you. Okay, cool. It looked like it dropped for a second, but I think we're here. Glitched, but we're back. Okay, good. Good. Thank you, guys. Yeah, so you go out and you drive or you walk around, and you are open and receptive, because that's the whole part. You have to be open and receptive to whatever's coming through, and you look for the first interesting thing that catches your eye, that catches your ear. It could be a song in a passing car or something like that, that seems to have a connection to your question. And then once you sort of receive that information, you can ask another question, and you just kind of go about during the synchronicity game, you just kind of go about asking questions and then being open and receptive to the things around you that are coming up. So it's usually best if you go outside and do this than instead of doing it at home. And I personally like to do it on foot, but you can definitely do it in a car as well. Now, another way that you can play it is that you can specifically ask the universe for a specific sign. So this way, I feel it's like a little bit riskier because then if you don't find the sign, then you get disappointed and you're like, what does that mean? But and so I get it's in some ways I would say it's a more advanced form of the game. But you you have like an intention, or you have some kind of a question, or you want insight into something, and you ask for a very specific item to be shown to you. And so there was about 2 months ago, I decided to play the synchronicity game. I love this game, and I decided to play it, and I was going to do the advanced version. And so I said I want to find a red feather, and here in Southern California, there really aren't very many red birds at all. In fact, I've rarely ever seen any. So what are the odds of finding this red feather, right? And so I was on this hiking trail. I was hiking up to the top of a mountain in Burbank, and um, and so I'm on the trail, and I'm thinking to myself the whole time, I'm like, God, you should have picked a different item, because like you're never gonna find that. And then what does that mean? Does it mean that like the answer to your question isn't true? Or what does it mean, right? And so I'm starting to really second guess myself. And there was this further point on the trail, and I was thinking about like backing out and going back down a different route. And something in me said, you should just climb all the way to the peak. And so I get to the peak of the mountain, and there's this little bench that people will sit and they'll watch the sunset on top of this bench. And I see something red sitting in the middle of the bench. And I'm like, what? And it's not a feather, but I see this red thing, right? And so I approach it kind of tentatively. And here's the crazy part is that it was this golf ball on the top of a mountain. Okay, I climbed 2,000 feet to like the top is like 3,200 feet. On the top of a mountain is this golf ball that's painted like a red bird. Spirit gave me my answer. It's just in the way that we could get it here in Southern California. So this is how the synchronicity game works. So anyway, just wanted to share that with you. It's just a really cool game to play and a great way to connect to spirit. So, all right. Another thing that you can do is draw, paint, color a mandala. Carl Jung believed that like coloring mandalas or working with them was one of the best ways to connect to the subconscious. And so again, the subconscious is that part of our mind that we need to connect to spirit. So if you are somebody who grew up with this idea that coloring is childish, I'd throw all of that out the window. And not only will coloring help your inner child, but it can also help you connect to spirit as well. And then, like I said earlier, creating a spiritual practice that is daily or almost daily is going to be your best bet to connect. And so that can include meditation. It can include candle gazing. It can include drawing a card. It can include some breath work. You can do something different every single day, but you want to do something spiritual every day. And that will be hands down the best way that you can connect to spirit. All right, so I am going to now, I've got some questions that were sent to me, so I'm going to go ahead and answer those. But if you're here live, please feel free to put some questions in the comments. It doesn't have to be about spirit element. It can be about anything related to witchcraft, shadow work, energy work, anything, okay? So let's go ahead and start with the question from Melinda. And she's got a good question. I like this one a lot, and I got an answer. So Melinda said, the other day I was talking about the Samhain Dumb Supper with someone, and they warned me that a person that means me harm could show up at the meal instead of who I invited. They said that the Dumb Supper is dangerous. Is this something I need to worry about? I thought if my intentions were clear, I wouldn't have to worry about anything showing up that wasn't welcome. Okay, so my first thought on this question is, was this someone who's actually done a dumb supper? Because to me, it sounds like someone who's never done one. Because I don't know about other people here, but I personally have never felt that the dumb supper is dangerous in any way. I feel like perhaps the person who said that either has no idea what it is or had a bad experience themselves, and they're kind of projecting that out onto the whole thing. Um, the Dumb Supper, for those who don't even know what the Dumb Supper is, it's on the other side of the wheel from now, 6 months from now at Samhain. Many witches will do a Dumb Supper, which is a silent meal where you don't speak. You set a table setting for our dearly departed loved ones. We invite them here to join us for the meal, and then we eat our meal in silence as well, sort of like in sympathy to them, that we can't speak to them in like the physical world, so we're going to stay silent as well. And it's a very reverent thing. I think that, there's like a lot of connections to, like, here in Southern California, especially the part of LA I live in. Dia de los Muertos is a huge deal, and just driving by the local cemeteries, we'll see people with picnic settings, and eating with their loved ones who've crossed over. So we find this tradition in many other places as well, of sharing a meal with those who have gone. And so never once in my mind, had it crossed it that, oh, we're bringing in evil spirits, or like other things are showing up that we don't want to be there. Here's the thing about the Dumb Supper is when you set the place setting, your invitation is for your dearly departed, not for your undearly departed, right? So we're not calling in the relatives that we had major problems with, right? We're not calling in evil spirits or dangerous things. You're calling in your dearly departed. And so I think that people generally fear what they don't understand. So they hear that. So I'm just imagining what this person might be thinking who said this comment to you. But I think that, they don't understand. They hear that you're calling the dead. That freaks them out a bit. And so, for example, people will say that Kundalini energy work will make you crazy. I've heard that over and over, and it usually comes from people who either had a bad experience, probably because they already had mental health problems that were already there, um, or people have no idea what Kundalini energy work is, and they just heard stories and they've decided to make up their mind about what they think it is, and they have no frame of reference or no experience. So that is my feeling about the person who told you this. But I'm here to tell you that there is nothing unsafe about the Dumb Supper. It's a reverent meal with your dearly departed, and there's nothing to worry about. All right, I hope that helps. Let's go to the next question. Okay. Okay, so this question is from Amy, and I like this one a lot too. So she said, how often is it appropriate to give offerings to your deity? And if it's something like sweets, I wrote this down, I can't read my writing. How long do you leave them? How long do you leave the offerings there? Okay, so great question. So the timing and the frequency of offerings is something that is totally up to you. There's no right or wrong to this. So some witches will leave an offering every day to a patron deity. Some witches will leave the offering once a week. Some will leave it on a full or a new moon, or they'll leave it whenever they call that deity. There's no right or wrong to this at all. So it's just kind of up to you. What feels right to you. It's always okay to also ask the deity. When we have a frank conversation with a deity, they will often tell us how many times to leave the offering. Now, if you are using a non-perishable offering, as far as the length of how long you can leave it out, if it's a non-perishable offering, you could leave it out long term. There's nothing that says you have to take it away at all, ever. If it's something that is perishable, the main thing is you just don't want it to rot. So, for example, I know that Amy works with Ganesha. So here's just an example. Ganesha loves bananas. It's his favorite food. And we know how quickly bananas will start to rot, right, or decay. And so I would only leave a banana out for Ganesha for like an hour or two or something, like even overnight would be okay. But then at some point you want to dispose of that out to the nature spirits, before it goes bad. Something though, like cookies or candy, like hard candy, isn't ever going to really rot, and so it's something that could be left more long term. So again, there's not really like a definitive answer to your question. It's more like, what do you feel like? What do you feel like, right? So how many times do you want to leave the offering? And as long as it's non-perishable, you can leave it as long as you want. Perishable things, you want to probably put them outside or dispose of them within a couple hours. Okay, because the other thing too to mention here is that the deities will have consumed that. You know, they'll consume it on the etheric plane. We won't see that in the physical plane. It's still going to look like the whole offering is there, but they will consume it in the etheric plane. And then once that's done, that's generally fairly quick. Once that's done, then you can dispose of the offering. And then Amy said she's actually working with Hecate right now, and she likes pastries. So then see, with the pastry, what you would want to do is you could definitely leave that out overnight unless you were afraid of ants. Here, we have times of the year, if I were to leave something like a pastry out, like if I left a pastry out right now, we'd be totally fine. I could leave it on the altar overnight, dispose of it the next day. If I left it closer to like August, I know that's our ant time, and I couldn't do that. Okay, so just use your judgment on that, but the pastry should be okay in a couple hours, and then you would dispose of it. And I would put it outside. I always put everything outside for the nature spirits if I can, as long as it's like safe. Okay, so great question. Let's see. Let me look at a couple in the chat, and then I have a couple other that were sent to me. So Kurt said, what is the major difference between the pentagram and the septagram, or the fairy star, like a 7-pointed star? I'm not really fully familiar with the purpose of the septagram, other than the fact that I know it's 7 points. So I'm not actually sure what each of the 7 points means, but it's just a different type of star. You know, the Star of David, the 6-pointed star, is also used in witchcraft. It's not called the Star of David and doesn't have the same purpose, but it's essentially a descending triangle and an ascending triangle put together. And from a witchcraft perspective, or from like a perspective, like an Eastern perspective, it would be basically the ascension of the lower 3 chakras, the root, the sacral chakra, and the solar plexus. Or we could think of the ascension of earth, water, and fire, and then the descension of the upper chakras coming down into the physical plane. So that would be like the 6-pointed star. The 7-pointed star, I'm not sure though. But good question. I would just do Google that, or if there's anybody here in the chat who knows much about the septagram or the fairy star, that's a good question, and maybe they can answer it. Okay, Colleen said, with art, I was always told I was bad at it, but I've realized it was more about not fitting their view of good art. Yep, that is, yes. I'm really enjoying exploring my artistic side, even more so now that it's a way to connect to spirit. Yeah, absolutely. So there are many messages that come to us when we are young, or even when we're not so young, that tell us like this is good or this is bad, or this is what's expected or not expected. And it can really cripple us when it comes to expressing ourselves. So having that permission to just let go, knowing that it is a great way to work with your inner child, is just to let go of the restrictions before all those voices came in and said what was good and what was bad art, or kind of letting go. But it's also a great way to connect to spirit. Yeah, so yeah, try do as much art as you can and really express that artistic side. And then Amy said ants were her issue with the pastry. Yeah, so then what I would do, if that's going to be an issue, leave it for the duration of the ritual. Like if it's for part of a ritual, I leave the offering for the duration of the ritual, then immediately get rid of it. If you can leave it up for an hour, you might be safe, and then you'll have to dispose of it. Or she does like pastries, but she does like other things too. So sometimes it's just we don't have the means or the space to offer certain things, and then you can offer other things to her too. But yeah, the ants can be it's a tough thing here too. If I left a banana to Ganesha out in August, that would not be a good thing. Okay, so I got a couple more questions here, but you guys can put more in the chat. So the next question is from Suzanne, and she said, how do you surrender to the divine? Okay, so Suzanne had a question last week, and so through answering that question, I knew that she had been doing some shadow work around, like kind of like exploring some things going back to high school, and we had talked about going a little further back and doing some inner child work. So the first key, why I bring that up, is the first thing with really surrendering to the divine is our shadow work. So people who are really, really scattered, ungrounded, not really doing shadow work, not sleeping, not, just kind of out of like your prime energy, are going to find it difficult to surrender. Surrendering is something that comes after like we get to this place where we're very balanced and very even. So anybody who wants to surrender to the divine and is finding it difficult to do that, I would recommend they go back and they kind of build a spiritual practice. They try to do something small daily, like we were talking about with the spirit element. They really take some serious time to do some shadow work. Maybe they do some inner child work. You're just setting all of this up because this is the foundation of how you let go. Now, once you have done that, all that, the shadow work, the energy work, everything is going to make it easier to surrender. And because really what it's doing is you're developing like trust in yourself, and through developing trust in yourself, you're developing trust in the universe, because it really takes that ultimate trust. And this is not the faith of like the Christian religion, and I could speak that, I could say this because I was Christian for, you know, whatever day I became a witch. I don't know. I was Christian for like 18 years or something, and it's not just the utter faith of like, I'll trust God to do everything for me and anything that happens to me is just simply God's will. It's not that kind of faith. It's trust that the universe has some kind of like a divine order or divine plan, right? And so when we do our shadow work, we're connecting to guides, we're really coming into our element. We find it easier to see that. And so what we see is that when the bad things happen to us, it's not like, oh, it's just the divine's will that happened. It's like, what could I learn from the experience? What patterns is the universe trying to show me? What does it want me to learn? What is the next step on the path? It's really having more of a conversation with the universe rather than just a blind acceptance and faith. And so when you have that conversation, when you arrive at that place because of all the work you've done, it's okay to tell the universe what you want. Like, I would like it to happen this way, but I am open to the wisdom of the universe. And if you can get to a place where you can say that and you can truly believe it, that's where the things start to change. That's where the surrendering starts to happen. So an example is like a few weeks ago, my cat got very sick. Some of you know this. He was hospitalized for several days. And what I didn't really talk about later is that when he came home, he was doing okay, and then he got sicker and sicker and sicker. And I thought he was going to die. And I was in a panic, and I really lost it for a few days because it was like I didn't really have enough reserves for that kind of stress. And that was part of it. But the other part was I was just, we're fighting against the things that we don't want to happen. We don't want to lose someone that we love, and we push and we fight against it. And so surrendering isn't about just saying, like, I accept that death. But what I did is I was like, I had this conversation with the universe, and I said, I'm not ready to lose him. And I know that someday I will have to say goodbye, but I'm not ready to do it right now. And but I also surrender to the divine plan, and I'm not going to fight against it. And so I voiced what I wanted, and then I let the universe, like, I let myself surrender to the universe. And I found that when I do that, the outcome is usually quite good. And my cat, it was discovered that he was on a medication that was making him very sick. And when they removed that medication, he got better, and he's okay now. So that's one example, but I've used that example many times in the past in different struggles that I've had, and I find that it works very well. So I think that to me is the best way I can say to surrender to the universe is just, get to a place where you are grounded, where you're connected to spirit, where you're like fully kind of in your element, you're balancing your elements, you're balancing your chakras, and then have that conversation with the universe, but then also leave the room, like, you leave room to like let the universe kind of guide everything and open you up to what's going on around you. So I hope that helps. And then I have another question here, and I'll go see if there's anything more in the chat. So Russell said, how do I start? And I had asked him because I wasn't sure start what, because the question is about witchcraft, shadow work, energy work. So I said, which one? And he said kind of all of it. He's a beginner to it. So I just wanted to give like one little tip for each area for Russell and for others who are wondering, where do I start? This is probably one of the biggest questions I get asked is, where do I start? Where do I begin? So when it comes to witchcraft, what I would say is what I notice the most in people who are coming to the craft, who are newer to the craft, and coming to it kind of for the first time, is that there's so much information out there. There's more so now than when I came to the craft like 27 years ago, or yeah, 26 years ago or something is when I kind of first started diving into it. And there was information there, but not like there is today. Now it's just, there's so much information. It's very hard to weed through it and figure out what's the right thing to read or not read, right? And so what I tell people to do is, rather than get overwhelmed by all the information, think about what drew you to the craft in the first place. Was it deities? Was it the elements? Was it divination? Was it healing? Tools? What is it that drew you to it first? And then study that thing. Okay, so if it was divination, then get a book on tarot, get a deck of tarot or a pendulum or something, and start working with that. But don't feel you've got to do all of the things at once, because I think that is going to lead to overwhelm, and it leads to a lot of people asking the question, where do I begin? Now, another thing that you can do, once you kind of figure out why am I drawn to this in the first place, is get yourself a good 101 book. And so I recommend The Outer Temple of Witchcraft by Christopher Penczak. This is a great resource for anybody beginning. He is a wonderful author. You will find everything you need to know to get you started in this book. It teaches you how to cast circles, how to call the quarters, how to work with deity, and then when you're ready to move on to more advanced things, you'll get other books. But this book would get everybody started really well. Now, another book, if people wanted to, if they wanted to study Wicca, I recommend this book, Wiccan Magic. Though even I think people who are not Wiccan could enjoy this. It's a very good book. It's one of my first books. I got it when I was probably 18 or something like that. Well-loved book, but a very good book. This one's by Raven Grimassi, Wiccan Magic. There's there's a companion book that's called The Wiccan Mysteries as well, and they're a pair. They go very well together. And then another idea is, outside of the books, is invest in a course. There's a lot of Wicca or Witchcraft 101 courses out there right now you can invest in, and or invest in a mentor. But that would be my advice for somebody kind of starting out on the witchcraft path. Now, if somebody wanted to know how to start shadow work, one of the best things to do is to start with some journaling prompts and just get your feet wet with them. So you just Google shadow work prompts. It's gonna pull up hundreds of different ones. Choose a couple from the page that seem to kind of stick out and are calling to you, and then you will either journal them, or like what I like to do is I go take a hike or a walk at dusk, because it's a very good time to connect to the shadow self, and then I contemplate the question and see what comes up for me. And then another thing a person can do if they want to dive into shadow work is really explore their triggers, what irks or irritates you. So every time that something kind of triggers you, ask yourself what it could possibly be connecting to. It's not always just what's on the surface. It could be going back to something in your childhood, or back to your parents or something like that, and getting to the root of what is irking or irritating or annoying you, removing the other person, removing the external, turning the mirror back on yourself and seeing what you can learn about yourself through what upsets you. So that would be a good way to start shadow work. And then as far as energy work, I think, the chakra system is one of the most accessible forms of energy work that you can do. And so I would just start working with your chakras. So start to learn about them. What are the 7 chakras? What are their associations? How do we work with them? How do we balance them? Good news is we have videos on all 7. We actually don't have a crown chakra one yet, but we have the 6 lower chakras. And so those are all on our Body Mind Witchcraft YouTube channel. But that would be my advice on how to kind of get started with energy work, witchcraft, and shadow work. So let me see if there's anything more in the chat here. And Amy had said that she can get overwhelmed by the information. Yeah, the chat is jumping on me. Yeah, it can be very overwhelming. There's a lot of information out there, so if people are super overwhelmed, that's why I recommend getting a book or investing in a course or something like that, because it's going to take away the overwhelm. And then Joey had said he just finished the Demystifying Witchcraft course, which is the witchcraft course we offer, Demystifying Witchcraft. It's right now only being offered to those in our Shadow Seekers membership, but we're about to open that up to the public soon as well. Amy said it's the best too. Yeah, I'm glad people are enjoying it. Yeah, so we're about to offer that to the public. So anybody who's not in Shadow Seekers will have a chance to purchase that course at some point soon as well. Let's see what else. Colleen said, people are asking about, what's tough for me is that, so when I see these comments, here I see, it's hard for me to see where the thread goes back. People are asking about the black pillar candles. I think it's jumping so much I can't tell what's... Facebook needs to do better with how these comments are coming in, because I can't tell what's even going on right now. But if anybody's looking for a black candle, especially if you want one like this, I saw these at Walmart in black the other day. I don't think it's just because I'm in Southern California, so you might go check Walmart for that. That shocked me when I saw it there. But I think somebody had said Michael's has them too. I'm just gonna see if there's anything else in the chat here. Oh yeah, and then Colleen said I got the Inner Temple of Witchcraft, and I did meant to mention that as well. So anybody who wants to do a little bit more energy work or more internal work, the Inner Temple of Witchcraft, which is a companion to the Outer Temple of Witchcraft, is also a very good book. Okay, so while I am going to tell you what's coming up. If anybody has any last questions, put them in the chat. I'll stay on and answer anything people have, but let me tell you what's coming up, including some really exciting things coming up. So on 5/15, I am so excited. I'm going to do an episode on 7 more deities for shadow work. So about 5 or 6 months ago, I did an episode on 7 deities for shadow work. It was one of our more popular episodes. People have been asking me to do another one, include deities I didn't include the first time. So that is coming up next week. So watch for that. There's going to be some deities that you know and you love included, and there's also going to be some you may have never heard of. On 5/22, we have, instead of Ask Aislinn, we're going to have our free public full moon ritual. This is Kali, burning away fears and negative emotions. We did this last May. It's a super powerful ritual. In fact, it was probably the ritual that the most people wrote into me and told me how transformative this ritual was for them. So we recommend you come. And it gives you an idea, too, what we do in our Shadow Seekers membership. So Shadow Seekers, we'd love for you to come as well. But it gives people who have not done any rituals with us before get a chance to see what we do. And I hope you'll come to that. So watch for more information on that as we get closer. There will be invites. The Zoom link will be here in the Facebook group. And you'll be able to get it if you're on our mailing list as well. Now, if you're not on our mailing list, I'm going to drop a link below where you can join the mailing list too, okay? And then on 5/23 to 5/31, the Shadow Seekers membership will be open. We'll be taking in new members. And then on 5/29, I'm going to be doing a shadow work, energy work Q&A. So I'm going to be collecting questions from people, anything you want to know about shadow work and energy work, and I'll be answering everything that night. And then here's what I'm so excited about, and you guys are going to benefit from this too. on 6/20 to 7/4. I don't know the exact date of my episode yet, but I am going to be part of the Phoenix Moon Circle 2024 Summit. I've been invited to be a speaker there. It's a live online summit that's going to last for 14 days. It goes for 2 weeks. I think every day there's like a different speaker, and it's all free and it's online, and it's very great way to like kind of learn more about different people. I don't know a lot about who else is speaking, but I know that I am. So as we get closer, I will be giving you more information about that, so you can come live and you can support me and also get to learn from some other speakers as well. So that's really exciting. Okay, so, and then Sonia said, what 2 necklaces are you wearing this evening? Oh, okay. So I am wearing, so the top one is just, it's a pentacle with, it's got like the little zodiac signs around the outside, and it has a little pentacle in the middle. And my good pentacle was stolen about 3 months ago by my cat Loki, and I have not been able to find it yet. So I am wearing this right now in place of that. And then the one below it is actually it's a tiger's eye goddess pendant that Beth gave me, the Maiden of Covenant of Midnight's Flame. And it's kind of funny because, you know, on Saturdays I always post the posts about stones and invite people to choose a stone with an intention for the week. And I chose tiger's eye last week, or maybe the week before, and it was about like negative energy, or kind of like blocking negative energy. And so I've been wearing her tiger's eye pendant since then. And I think it's been helping. So, so those are the 2 necklaces. All right. So I am going to let you guys go though, and I'll be back next week with 7 more deities for shadow work. So that'll be exciting. And if I missed any of the questions in the comments, it's chat is jumping around. I will go back. I'll answer anything I've missed. Okay, so make sure that if you haven't done so, leave a heart or a thumbs up somewhere in the video. It just helps us get this out into the feed of more people. And then if you're watching on YouTube, or you don't even know about our YouTube, make sure you go there, you subscribe to Body Mind Witchcraft, and you won't miss any future episodes. And we also have some new videos that are going to be coming out on the YouTube channel this summer. All right, until next time, blessed be.